For 7 years, her husband trained her to believe one lie, that a woman's worth could be measured by the sound of a baby crying in the next room. And for 7 years, she tried to earn love the way starving people try to earn bread, quietly, desperately, and with bruises hidden under sleeves. But on the night he finally threw her out, not just from his home but from her own dignity, she didn't die the way he expected. Because destiny, wearing a crown of darkness and carrying 5 grieving children, found her first. And the moment the Vampire King's red eyes fell on her trembling body in the snow, he didn't see Barren. He saw Queen. Sarah Malik had once believed marriage was supposed to feel like shelter. Like 2 hands protecting a candle flame. When she first married Hasib Qureshi, everyone said she was lucky. He came from a respected family, had a thriving business, and spoke like a man who knew exactly what kindness sounded like. But some men learn tenderness the way actors learn lines. They perform it until the door closes. Then they show you who they really are. It started with small things. Jokes at her expense in front of guests, comments about her cooking, her clothes, her slow mind. When she tried to defend herself, he'd smile like she was being dramatic. "You're too sensitive," he'd say. And because Sarah had grown up poor, because she'd learned to swallow pain quietly, she told herself, be patient. Be grateful. Don't make trouble. Then came the doctor visits. Month after month, test after test. Every time the results came back uncertain, Hasib's disappointment grew sharper. Not in sadness, in blame. He began to say the word barren like a verdict. When she cried, he said, crying won't change what you are. When she prayed, he said, even God knows some women are not meant to be mothers. And when his mother joined in, when his sisters started whispering in rooms that fell silent when she entered, Sarah felt the walls of the house closing in, not around her body but around her identity. She tried to compensate in every way she could. She woke before dawn to wash clothes. She cooked until her hands burned. She took side jobs sewing garments for neighbors, slipping the money into the kitchen drawer when Hasib wasn't watching. She endured humiliation because she kept thinking of the same sentence. Maybe if I love harder, he will soften. But love doesn't soften stone. Sometimes it just breaks the person pressing their palms against it. The final night began like any other, quiet, normal, ordinary. Sarah stood in the kitchen holding a cup of tea, listening to Hasib's footsteps in the hall. She knew his moods by sound now. Heavy steps meant anger. Light steps meant mockery. Silence meant something worse, cold decisions forming behind his eyes. He entered the kitchen with his phone in hand, his expression too calm. Pack your things, he said. Sarah blinked. What? He leaned against the counter as if he were discussing groceries. My cousin's friend is a lawyer. You won't get anything. Don't try. Her heart stuttered. Hasib, what are you saying? I'm saying, he replied, I'm done wasting my life on a woman who can't give me heirs. Sarah's hands shook so badly the tea sloshed onto the floor. Hasib, we haven't even finished the tests. The doctor said. The doctor said maybe, he snapped. And I'm done living on maybe. His mother walked in behind him, eyes hard as glass. We gave you enough time, she said. A woman who cannot give children should not hold a place in a man's home. Sarah looked from one face to the other, searching for a crack of mercy, for a memory of the man who once promised her safety. But Hasib's eyes were flat. Not angry. Not emotional. Just decided. Where will I go? Sarah whispered. That's not my problem. Sarah's throat tightened. I have no family here. My father. Your father is dead, Hasib said, impatient. And your mother lives in a rented room and can barely feed herself. You should have thought about that before you turned out useless. Useless. The word hit like a slap. Sarah stared at the floor because if she met his eyes, she might crumble completely. She forced herself to speak. Let me at least take my clothes. You can take what you can carry. Sarah moved like a ghost. She went to the bedroom, hands numb, putting a few items into an old bag, the same bag she had used when she first came as a bride. She paused at the mirror. Her face looked older than her years. Not because of time, but because of fear. When she returned to the living room, Hasib was holding her coat. A thin coat. Not enough for winter. He tossed it onto the couch like it was trash. Go, he said. Sarah's lips trembled. It's midnight. He shrugged. Then walk faster. And just like that, the door that had once felt like the entrance to a new life became the exit to a nightmare. She stepped outside. The air stabbed her lungs. Snow was falling, not softly, not gently, but in thick, relentless sheets, as if the sky itself had decided to bury the world. Sarah walked with no direction, no plan. her bag strap cut into her shoulder. Her fingers went numb. Her mind replayed the same question again and again. How can someone erase you so easily? At some point her legs gave out. She found a bench near an empty bus stop, the streetlights flickering like tired eyes. She sat down, hugging her bag to her chest as if it could keep her alive. Her breath came out in shaky clouds. Her teeth chattered. Snow gathered on her hair and lashes. And the strangest thought entered her mind. Not panic, not rage, but a quiet, exhausted realization. So this is how it ends. A car passed, splashing slush. No one stopped. Another passed. No one looked. Sarah closed her eyes, and the world began to blur into a cold, distant echo. That was when she heard it. Not a car. Not footsteps. Something else. A low rolling sound like wheels on stone. She opened her eyes. Through the curtain of snow, she saw a black carriage moving down the road. A carriage. In a modern city. For a moment, she wondered if she was hallucinating from hypothermia. But then the carriage stopped. And the door opened. 5 small figures stepped out. Children. They didn't look like ordinary children. Their skin was pale in a way that didn't belong to winter. Their eyes caught the streetlight and reflected it strangely, like polished gemstones. They stood close together, silent, as if silence was a language they'd been forced to learn. Then a tall man stepped down from the carriage. The air seemed to shift around him. He was dressed in a dark coat that looked expensive, old-fashioned, and perfectly tailored, like it had been stitched for someone who didn't need warmth but wore it anyway. His hair was silver black, dusted with snow. His face was devastatingly calm. And his eyes were red. Not bright red like costume lenses. Red like embers buried in ash. Sarah's body screamed at her to run. But she couldn't move. The man approached slowly, his boots barely making sound on the snow. The children followed at a careful distance, watching her like she was a wounded animal that might bite. The man stopped a few steps away. For a long moment he simply looked at her. And Sarah realized something terrifying. He wasn't looking at her the way humans look at strangers. He was looking at her the way something ancient looks at something important. Are you alone? He asked. His voice was low, controlled, and oddly gentle, like someone who knew power and chose softness anyway. Sarah's throat worked. Yes. The man's gaze flicked to her bag, to her shaking hands, to the thin coat. Then to the bruises on her wrist, faint marks Sarah hadn't even realized were visible. Something cold passed over his face. Not cruelty. Not disgust. Something like restrained fury. One of the children, a little girl with dark curls, stepped forward, clutching the sleeve of the boy beside her. She's like the lady in the story, the girl whispered. Hush, the older boy murmured, but his eyes didn't leave Sarah. Sarah's lips parted. Who are you? The man didn't answer immediately. He glanced back at the carriage, then at the empty street. As if he were calculating danger. As if the world was not safe, even for him. Finally he said, someone who understands what it means to be discarded. Sarah gave a bitter laugh that sounded more like a sob. Then you understand you should keep walking. His eyes narrowed slightly. No. The word was simple. Final. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just absolute. Sarah's skin prickled. Why? The man's gaze softened in a way that didn't match his terrifying appearance. Because, he said, a woman does not freeze on a bench in the snow unless someone convinced her she deserved it. Sarah swallowed hard, tears instantly freezing on her lashes. I don't want trouble. Neither do I, he replied. But trouble finds the helpless quickly. He removed his cloak, thick, heavy, lined with something that looked like black velvet, and held it out toward her. Take it. Sarah flinched. I can't. You can, he corrected, voice steady. And you will. Something about the way he said it didn't feel like an order meant to control her. It felt like an order meant to save her. Sarah hesitated. Every warning in her body screamed that accepting anything from a stranger was dangerous. But then she looked at the children. 5 small faces. 5 sets of pale hands. They were watching her not with hunger, not with mockery, but with something fragile. Curiosity. Hope. And something else. A quiet grief so deep it didn't even have tears left. Sarah reached out slowly and took the cloak. The warmth that wrapped around her wasn't just physical. It felt alive. Like the night itself had chosen to protect her. What do you want from me? She whispered. The man's gaze held hers. And when he spoke, the words landed in her chest like a bell rung in a ruined temple. I want nothing, he said. Except for you to live. He paused, eyes flicking toward the children. My name is King Alaric Draven. Sarah's breath caught. A ridiculous reaction, because kings didn't exist in her world. Not like this. Not stepping out of shadowed carriages at midnight. Alaric continued, calm and deadly serene. My children and I are traveling. We need shelter before dawn. There is an estate outside the city. You will come with us. Sarah shook her head, panic rising. No, I can't. I'm nobody. Alaric took a step closer, not invading but firm. Nobody, he repeated softly as if tasting the word. That is what they taught you to call yourself. Sarah's hands clenched the cloak. I don't even have money. I didn't offer you a transaction. One of the younger boys spoke, voice quiet but sharp. Father doesn't rescue people. Alaric's jaw tightened slightly. Tonight, I do. Sarah looked at the children again. The oldest boy, Lucian, she somehow knew, stood straight, protecting the smaller ones with his posture. The smallest girl stared at Sarah like she was looking at sunlight for the first time. What happened to their mother? Sarah heard herself ask. The air went colder. The children's expressions shuddered. Alaric's eyes darkened, and for the first time, his voice carried something raw under the control. She is gone, he said. A simple sentence. But it sounded like a kingdom collapsed inside it. Sarah's heart squeezed. Not because she understood vampires or kings, she didn't, but because she understood loss. And because she recognized something in his face. A man who carried responsibility like a wound. A man who had no one left to lean on. Sarah's lips trembled. I'm not safe with men. Alaric didn't flinch. He didn't look offended. He didn't demand trust. He simply said, then trust my word, not your fear. He lifted his gloved hand, palm open, staying several steps away. I will not touch you unless you ask, he said. I will not harm you. And no one who travels with me will harm you either. Sarah's breath shook. Why? She whispered again, desperate for logic. Alaric's gaze held hers, and in the red glow of his eyes, she saw something that frightened her more than his power. Recognition. As if he had been searching for something without knowing its name. Because my kingdom is dying, he said quietly. Sarah froze. My children are not children of ordinary blood, he continued. They carry an ancient line. A line that has suffered. Lucian's jaw tightened. The curly-haired girl looked down. Alaric's voice lowered further. And when I looked at you, freezing in the snow, cast out by people who should have protected you, I felt something I have not felt in centuries. Sarah's throat tightened. What? Alaric's gaze sharpened. Hope, he said. A beat of silence passed, filled only by falling snow. Sarah stared at him, her mind screaming that this was impossible, ridiculous, dangerous. But then her body betrayed her. Her vision blurred. Her legs went weak. The world tilted. She swayed, and the last thing she saw before darkness took her was Alaric moving like lightning, not touching her, not grabbing, but positioning himself so she would fall against his cloak instead of onto the frozen ground. And in the faintest whisper she heard him say, more to himself than to her. Found you. Sarah woke to darkness that didn't feel empty. It felt awake. She lay in a bed so large it felt like a field of velvet. The ceiling above her was carved stone, black, polished, reflecting faint blue flames from torches lining the walls. She jolted upright, panic surging. A woman appeared instantly beside the bed, pale, elegant, eyes like silver moons. Easy, the woman said. Your body is recovering. Sarah's heart pounded. Where am I? The Obsidian Keep, the woman replied. Sarah's breath caught. That's not real. The woman's lips twitched, not quite a smile. To you perhaps. Sarah swung her legs over the side of the bed, but dizziness hit her like a wave. The woman pressed a cool hand to her shoulder, holding her gently in place. Do not stand yet, she said. You were nearly dead. Sarah stared at her. Who are you? I am Lady Seraphine, the woman said. Healer to the Draven bloodline. Sarah's stomach dropped. Vampire. Seraphine nodded calmly. Yes. Sarah's hands clenched the sheets. Let me go. Seraphine's gaze was clinical, but not cruel. You are not a prisoner. You are a guest. Sarah swallowed. Guests don't wake up in castles. Seraphine looked toward the shadows of the room. And Sarah followed her gaze. There, half hidden by darkness, stood King Alaric Draven. Arms crossed. Coat removed. Shirt collar open at the throat. He looked less like a monster now and more like a war that had learned to walk in human form. His red eyes met hers. You're awake, he said. Sarah's voice shook. Why did you bring me here? Alaric didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked closer, slow, measured, stopping at a respectful distance just like he promised. "You were dying," he said simply. "I chose not to let you." Sarah's throat tightened. "I didn't ask you to." Alaric's gaze hardened, not at her but at the memory of what was done to her. "I know." A sound came from the doorway. A soft, excited whisper. Sarah's eyes snapped to it and she saw 5 children peeking around the doorframe, eyes wide with cautious hope. The curly-haired girl waved timidly. Seraphine sighed. "My king, they have been waiting for hours." Alaric's jaw tightened. "They should be resting." Lucien stepped forward, bolder than the others. "We wanted to see if she lived." Sarah stared at them, heart twisting. Alaric's voice sharpened, but not unkindly. "Out." The children hesitated. Then the smallest girl, Mara, whispered, "She smells warm." Sarah blinked at the strange statement. Mara smiled shyly, then disappeared behind the others. The door closed. Silence returned. Sarah looked back at Alaric and suddenly the fear in her chest tangled with something else, something she didn't want to name. Because no one had looked at her like this in years. Not with desire. Not with pity. But with interest that felt like respect. "You don't know me," Sarah said, voice cracking. "You don't know what I am." Alaric's gaze stayed steady. "I know what they told you were." Sarah's eyes burned. "They said I was barren." The word tasted like poison. Seraphine's expression tightened. Alaric's face went still. Then he said something that made Sarah's breath stop. "In my world," Alaric said quietly, "there are women who cannot bear children, and there are women who cannot bear cruelty." Sarah swallowed. "What does that mean?" "It means," Alaric replied, "your body may or may not carry life." He took a slow step closer, still not touching, his voice dropping into something dangerously sincere. "But your soul carries something rarer." Sarah's chest tightened. "What?" Alaric's eyes flicked toward the door where his children had been. 5 children, he said. "All born of a queen I lost. 5 children who have not laughed in a year. 5 children who have begun to fade in ways that terrify even my healers." Seraphine's eyes lowered. Alaric's voice turned like steel wrapped in velvet. "And when they sat near you in the carriage," he said, "their color returned. Their shaking stopped. Their eyes brightened." Sarah's blood ran cold. "That's impossible." Seraphine spoke softly. "It is not. Some mortals carry gifts without knowing. Some are bound to our world." Sarah shook her head, trembling. "I'm just a poor woman who got thrown away." Alaric's gaze sharpened. "No," he said. "You are a woman who survived." He paused. Then, like a blade sliding from its sheath, he delivered the line that changed the air in the room. "And I do not believe you were thrown into my path by accident." Sarah's mouth went dry. "What are you saying?" Alaric's eyes glowed faintly, not with hunger, with certainty. "I am saying," he said, "that my kingdom has been searching for a queen, and perhaps the world has been hiding her in plain sight." Sarah's breath hitched. "I'm not royalty." Alaric's expression softened, almost imperceptibly. "Neither was my late queen," he said, "until she chose to stand beside me." Sarah stared at him. A part of her wanted to run. A part of her wanted to laugh. And a part of her, small, terrified, starving, wanted to believe. Because for the first time in 7 years, a powerful man wasn't looking at her like she was broken. He was looking at her like she mattered. Seraphine cleared her throat gently. "My king, we should confirm." A sudden scream echoed through the halls. Not a violent scream. A child's scream, sharp with fear. Alaric's entire body changed in an instant. The calm vanished. The king became something predatory, protective, lethal. He moved toward the door. Sarah's heart lurched. "What?" Another cry. "Mara!" someone shouted. Alaric's head snapped toward the sound. Then he looked back at Sarah, eyes burning. "Stay here," he ordered. Sarah's voice shook. "Is she okay?" Alaric's jaw clenched. "I don't know." He left the room like a storm. Sarah sat frozen, cloak still wrapped around her shoulders, heart pounding for children she didn't know, and a king she shouldn't trust. But something deep inside her whispered a frightening thought. Maybe this is why you lived. Because some endings are not endings at all. Sometimes they're the first page of a different life. A queen without knowing. Sarah thought the worst thing she could hear was a husband calling her barren. She was wrong. The worst thing was a child screaming in terror inside a castle of monsters, while the only man who had ever protected her sprinted toward the sound like he was ready to burn the world down. And when Sarah finally reached that corridor, she didn't find an enemy. She found something far more dangerous. A secret. Because little Mara wasn't screaming at a stranger. She was screaming at her own reflection, and inside that mirror, something ancient was waking up. The moment King Alaric left, the chamber felt colder, even with blue flames dancing on the walls. The healer, Seraphine, watched Sarah like she was measuring a fragile glass in a room full of stone. "Do not move," Seraphine said, voice calm but firm. "Your body is still weak." Sarah's hands clenched the blanket. A child screamed. Seraphine's eyes flicked toward the door. For the first time, something like worry cracked her controlled expression. "Yes." Sarah swallowed. "What's happening?" Seraphine hesitated, and that hesitation spoke louder than any answer. "The children," she began slowly, "they are bound to the throne, to the bloodline. When their mother died." Sarah's chest tightened. "How did she die?" Seraphine's gaze sharpened, as if remembering something that tasted like ash. "Not now." Sarah pushed the blankets aside anyway. Dizziness struck instantly, but she forced her feet onto the cold floor. Seraphine caught her elbow without squeezing. "You shouldn't." "I'm not staying in bed while a child is afraid," Sarah snapped, surprising herself. Seraphine went still. Then her mouth softened just a fraction. Not approval, but recognition. "Kindness," she murmured, almost to herself. "That is exactly what he sensed." Sarah steadied her breathing. "Then take me to them." Seraphine studied Sarah for a beat, then nodded sharply. "Stay close. And whatever you see, do not run. Fear feeds things here." Sarah's stomach dropped. "Feeds what?" Seraphine didn't answer. She simply opened the chamber door, and the hallway beyond looked like a cathedral carved from night. Black stone. Silver veins in the walls like frozen lightning. Torches burning blue, their flames soundless. And somewhere deeper in the keep, the echo of panic. Sarah followed Seraphine, cloak wrapped tight around her shoulders. Their footsteps were nearly silent. They turned a corner, and immediately Sarah saw him. Alaric Draven. He stood at the end of the corridor with Lucien beside him, the other children huddled behind the oldest boy like frightened shadows. Alaric's posture was deadly still, as if he were holding back something monstrous. "Where is she?" he demanded. A servant knelt, trembling. "My king," she ran into the mirror gallery. "We tried to stop her." Alaric's eyes flashed red. "You tried." The servant flinched like the air itself struck him. Sarah's heart thudded. "Mirror gallery?" As Sarah stepped closer, Alaric's gaze snapped to her instantly. Not anger. Not annoyance. Something sharper. Fear. "Why are you out of bed?" he said, voice low. Sarah swallowed. "I heard her scream." Alaric's jaw tightened. "You should not be here." Sarah looked at the children. Their faces were pale, their eyes too old for their small bodies. Mara's scream echoed again, thin, broken, terrified. Sarah's throat tightened. "She needs someone." Alaric's gaze hardened. "She needs safety." Sarah didn't flinch. "Then let me help." For a moment, the corridor fell silent. Lucien stared at Sarah like he was trying to decide if she was a blessing or another danger. Alaric's voice dropped to something like a warning. "If you walk into the mirror gallery, you may see things that were never meant for human eyes." Sarah's hands shook, but she lifted her chin anyway. "I've already seen what humans can do." That sentence landed in the hallway like a blade. Alaric's eyes narrowed, then, slowly, he nodded. "Then stay beside me," he said. "Do not wander." Sarah nodded. They moved. The mirror gallery doors were enormous, carved with symbols that looked like roses made of thorns. 2 guards stood frozen at either side, their faces grim. Alaric pushed the doors open. Cold hit Sarah like a wave. Inside, the gallery stretched long and wide, lined with tall mirrors framed in black metal and silver bone. The floor was polished so perfectly it reflected the blue flames like an ocean of moonlight. And at the far end, Mara. She stood barefoot, small hands pressed to the mirror, shaking so hard her curls bounced. "Mara," Lucien called softly. "Come back. Please." Mara didn't turn. She whispered, voice trembling. "It's not me, it's not me, it's not me." Sarah's heart squeezed. Alaric's voice turned into pure command. "Mara. Step away." Mara's shoulders rose with a sob. "She's behind me, father." Sarah frowned. "Who?" Mara finally turned. Her eyes were wide and glassy with terror. "She's behind me," Mara repeated, pointing toward the mirror. Sarah looked, and her blood turned to ice. Because in the mirror, Sarah saw Mara's reflection. But behind Mara's reflection stood another figure. A woman. Tall. Pale. Crowned. Her eyes were like dark rubies. Her hair flowed like ink. And she was smiling, slowly, gently, like she had been waiting. Sarah blinked hard. The figure didn't vanish. Seraphine's voice went tight. No. Alaric's entire body stiffened. That's impossible. Lucien whispered, barely audible. Mother? Sarah's breath caught. The crowned woman in the mirror lifted her hand. And Mara screamed again, falling to her knees. The mirror rippled like water. Alaric surged forward, but an invisible force slammed into him, stopping him mid-step. The blue flames flickered wildly. The air turned heavy. Sarah's instinct screamed, run. But she remembered Seraphine's warning. Fear feeds things here. Sarah forced herself to breathe. She stepped forward, slowly. Alaric's head snapped toward her. Sarah, stop. Sarah didn't. She approached Mara, who was curled on the floor like a broken bird. Sarah crouched carefully a few feet away, keeping her hands visible. Mara, Sarah whispered, voice soft. Look at me. Mara's eyes darted up. She was crying, but she didn't recoil. Sarah's throat tightened. You're safe. Mara choked out a sob. No, I'm not. She wants me. Sarah swallowed. Who is she? Mara pointed at the mirror again. The queen. Lucien's breath hitched. Seraphine whispered, the late queen is dead. The mirror woman smiled wider. Sarah felt it then, a pressure in her chest like someone was pressing a finger against the center of her soul. Not pain. A pull. Like a thread tightening. Sarah's voice came out trembling. Alaric, who was your queen? Alaric's jaw clenched so hard the muscle jumped. Her name was Evelyn. The mirror woman's lips moved. No sound came out. But Sarah understood her anyway, as if the words landed inside her skull. She does not belong here. Sarah's eyes widened. Alaric's gaze snapped to Sarah. You heard that. It wasn't a question. Sarah swallowed. Yes. Seraphine's face drained of color. How? Sarah's hands trembled. I don't know. The mirror woman's eyes shifted, locking onto Sarah now. And suddenly Sarah felt something else. Not cold. Not fear. A deep, ancient recognition, like her soul was being examined by something that remembered the beginning of time. The mirror woman lifted her hand again. The mirror rippled. And for a heartbeat, Sarah saw something behind Evelyn's image. A shadow. Not human. Not vampire. Something with too many eyes, too many mouths, like a nightmare given breath. Sarah's stomach lurched. Mara screamed again, and the shadow in the mirror pressed closer. Alaric roared, a sound inhuman, furious, and the torches flared. Still, the invisible force kept him from reaching his daughter. Lucien grabbed his siblings, pulling them back. Seraphine's voice sharpened. The mirror gallery is warded. It was built to contain cursed reflections. It responds to royal blood. The children's grief triggered it. Sarah's mind raced. Then how do we stop it? Seraphine's eyes flicked to Sarah, tight, wary. We need a counterbond. Something that calms the children. Something that anchors them to the living. Sarah stared at Mara, shaking on the floor. She didn't think. She just did what she had done her whole life. She reached out. Not to grab. Not to pull. Just to offer her hand. Mara, Sarah whispered. Hold my hand. Mara's eyes darted to Alaric. Alaric's face was stone, but his gaze was fierce. Mara, he said, voice breaking through his own control, if you trust anyone, trust her. Mara hesitated. Then she placed her small, icy fingers into Sarah's. The moment their skin touched, the blue flame steadied. The invisible pressure in the air loosened. The mirror rippled again, and the shadow behind Evelyn recoiled like it had been burned. Sarah gasped as something warm surged through her chest. Not like blood, not like magic, but like a heartbeat that wasn't hers. Mara's breathing steadied. Her shoulders stopped shaking. And the mirror woman, Evelyn, stared at Sarah with sudden, sharp focus. Not smiling now. Warning. Her lips moved again, and Sarah heard the words in her mind, crystal clear. If you stay, you will die. Sarah's blood ran cold. Alaric's eyes narrowed. What did she say? Sarah's lips parted, but before she could answer, the mirror shattered. Not with glass. With light. A burst of black and blue energy exploded outward, throwing everyone back. Sarah hit the floor hard. Her ears rang. When she looked up, the mirrors along the walls were vibrating, rippling like water. Seraphine screamed, "Get out! Now!" Alaric lunged, finally free of the invisible force, and moved with terrifying speed, scooping Mara into his arms. Lucien pulled the other children. Seraphine grabbed Sarah's cloak and yanked her toward the doors. They ran. The hallway outside felt warmer instantly. The doors slammed shut behind them with a boom that shook the keep. Silence. Only heavy breathing remained. Mara clung to Alaric, face buried in his neck. Lucien's eyes burned as he stared at the closed doors. That was Mother. Seraphine's voice trembled, rare fear showing. No, my prince. That was not your mother. Alaric's gaze snapped to her. Explain. Seraphine swallowed. The late queen's reflection should not remain. Not unless something is wearing her face. Sarah's skin prickled. Alaric's eyes turned to Sarah. You heard her. Sarah's throat tightened. Yes. Seraphine looked at Sarah like she was seeing her for the first time. A mortal should not be able to hear a mirror spirit. Sarah's voice shook. I didn't know I could. Alaric stared at her, expression unreadable. Then he asked a question that made Sarah's stomach drop. Sarah, he said slowly, what exactly are you? Sarah swallowed hard. I'm just a woman. Seraphine's eyes narrowed. No. Lucien's gaze sharpened. Father, she stopped it. Mara lifted her head from Alaric's shoulder, eyes puffy with tears. She feels like home, Mara whispered. Alaric's jaw clenched. His voice lowered, dangerous and protective all at once. Take the children to their chambers. Triple the guards. No one goes near the mirror gallery. Servants rushed in bowing. Lucien hesitated. Father. Alaric's eyes softened briefly. Go. Lucien led his siblings away, though he kept looking back at Sarah like he didn't trust the world to leave her standing. When they were finally alone, Sarah, Alaric, and Seraphine, Alaric stepped closer to Sarah, stopping at the same respectful distance. His red eyes searched her face. Those bruises on your wrists, he said quietly. Who did that? Sarah's throat tightened. For a second she wanted to lie. She had been trained to lie. Trained to protect the people who hurt her. But something about Alaric's gaze, about the fact that he had just risked everything for his child, made Sarah's voice come out raw and honest. My husband, she whispered. And his family. Alaric's expression went utterly still. Seraphine's hands clenched. Alaric's voice was soft, but it carried the promise of destruction. He cast you out, Alaric said. Sarah nodded, tears burning. Because I couldn't give him children. The air around Alaric seemed to darken. And then he said something that made Sarah's breath stop. In my world, he murmured, a man who harms what is under my protection loses more than his home. Sarah's heart pounded. I'm not under your protection. Alaric's eyes locked onto hers. Yes, he said. You are. Sarah's chest tightened. Why? Alaric's jaw flexed. Because he couldn't speak the full truth yet. Because he didn't want to admit how deeply her presence affected his children. Because maybe he feared what it meant. So he only said, because you walked into a cursed gallery full of mirrors and did not run. He paused. And because the keep responded to you. Seraphine's voice dropped into something grave. My king, if the keep recognizes her. Alaric's eyes narrowed. Then she is tied to us. Sarah's breath shook. I don't understand. Seraphine hesitated, then spoke like she was forcing herself to reveal a secret she hated. The obsidian keep was built on an ancient oath, she said. It does not accept mortals. It rejects them. It makes them ill. Weak. Sarah swallowed. Then why am I not? Seraphine's eyes held Sarah's. Because it is not rejecting you. Silence fell, thick and heavy. Sarah's hands trembled. What does that mean? Alaric's gaze didn't leave her face. It means, he said slowly, either you are far more than you believe. He paused, voice lowering. Or you are exactly what my enemies fear. Sarah's blood ran cold. Enemies? Alaric's eyes flashed. Nobles who want my throne, he said. Creatures older than vampires who want my bloodline extinguished. Seraphine's voice tightened. The shadow in the mirror, it was not grief. It was a curse waking up. Sarah's chest tightened. Why now? Seraphine stared at Sarah. Because you arrived, she said softly. Sarah's mind spun. Then Alaric said the sentence that made her stomach drop into her feet. Tomorrow, he said, my court will gather. Sarah's throat went dry. Why? Alaric's gaze turned deadly calm. Because they will sense you, he said. And they will try to take you from me. Sarah's voice cracked. I don't want this. Alaric's expression softened, just a fraction. I know, he said quietly. Then like a vow he added, but you are here now. And I will not let anyone harm you again. Sarah stared at him. The king of monsters. A man of darkness. Yet the only person who had treated her like a human being. She whispered, barely audible. What if your people hate me? Alaric's eyes held hers, steady as stone. Then they will learn humility, he said. Seraphine exhaled sharply. My king. Alaric didn't look away from Sarah. Rest, he told her. Tomorrow will be war in silk and smiles. Sarah's heart pounded. And if the mirror voice was right? If I die? Alaric's gaze turned frighteningly intense. Then, he said, voice low and absolute, I will tear destiny apart and drag you back. Sarah's breath caught. Because the promise in his voice wasn't romantic. It was royal. It was dangerous. It was real. And deep inside Sarah, something stirred, small, frightened, but waking. Not hope. Not yet. Something harder. A will to survive. That night, Sarah lay in her chamber unable to sleep. The keep hummed around her like a living creature. In the distance she heard children's voices, soft for the first time, not haunted, just curious. She pressed her hand to her chest, and felt it again. That strange warmth. That thread. As if somewhere, something ancient had reached out, and tied her fate to a vampire king and 5 grieving children. Sarah closed her eyes and whispered into the darkness. Why me? And deep in the keep, behind sealed doors, the mirror gallery whispered back, silent but certain. Because you were chosen. The court that feared her. By dawn, the obsidian keep no longer felt like a refuge. It felt like a blade wrapped in velvet, beautiful, deadly, and waiting to be tested. Because word travels faster than blood in a vampire court. And before Sarah had even learned how to walk its halls without trembling, the kingdom already knew she existed. Sarah woke to silence so deep it pressed against her ears. Not peaceful silence. Expectant silence. The kind that comes before judgment. She lay still beneath silk sheets, staring at the black stone ceiling, listening to the slow rhythm of her own breath. The warmth she had felt the night before still lingered faintly in her chest, like an ember refusing to die. A knock sounded. Soft. Controlled. Enter, Sarah said quietly, surprising herself with how steady her voice was. The door opened and Seraphine stepped inside, followed by 2 attendants carrying garments folded with ceremonial precision. You slept, Seraphine observed. A little, Sarah replied. The keep hums. Seraphine inclined her head. It recognizes you. Sarah's stomach tightened. That doesn't comfort me. It should terrify you, Seraphine said honestly. The attendants laid the garments across the bed. Sarah stared. The fabric was deep midnight blue, threaded with silver patterns that looked almost like constellations. Not a gown meant to seduce, but one meant to declare. I can't wear that, Sarah whispered. Seraphine's eyes sharpened. You must. Sarah swallowed. Why? Because today, Seraphine said, the court gathers. Sarah's pulse spiked. Alaric said they would try to take me. Seraphine nodded. Or destroy you. Or use you. Sarah's hands clenched. I'm not a weapon. Seraphine stepped closer. That is what frightens them. The attendants waited silently. Sarah exhaled slowly. What happens if I refuse? Seraphine didn't hesitate. They will smell weakness. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment. She remembered the kitchen floor. The cold tea spilling. Hasib's voice saying go. She opened her eyes again. Help me dress, she said. Seraphine studied her, then for the first time bowed slightly. The great hall of obsidian was alive with motion. Nobles filled the chamber in waves of silk, leather, armor, and bone. Their eyes glowed faintly, reds, golds, violets, reflecting power honed over centuries. Whispers slithered through the air. She's human. She touched the mirror gallery and lived. The children changed. The king has lost his mind. At the far end of the hall, the throne rose like a carved shadow, black stone veined with silver, ancient symbols etched into every curve. King Alaric Draven sat upon it, still as death itself. Lucian stood to his right, spine straight, jaw tight. The younger children were not present. That alone made the court uneasy. Then the doors opened. Silence fell like a guillotine blade. Sarah stepped into the hall beside Seraphine. Every eye turned. She felt it, the weight of their gazes, sharp as knives, dissecting her piece by piece. Human. Mortal. Breakable. Her heart hammered, but she forced herself to walk forward, step by measured step. She stopped at the foot of the throne. Alaric did not rise. But his eyes burned. Not at her. At them. This is the woman, he said, voice carrying effortlessly through the hall, under my protection. A murmur surged. Lord Vaylor stepped forward, a tall vampire with eyes like molten gold and a smile that never reached them. Protection, Vaylor drawled. From what, my king? She is fragile. Mortal. She will age while you remain unchanged. Sarah felt his gaze rake over her like an insult. Alaric's voice was cold. Speak carefully. Valor bowed mockingly. Forgive me, but the court deserves to know why a human stands where a queen should. Sarah's chest tightened. Alaric didn't answer immediately. He looked at Sarah. Not demanding. Not commanding. Waiting. Sarah swallowed. Every instinct screamed at her to stay silent. But silence had never saved her before. She lifted her chin. I didn't ask to be here, Sarah said, voice trembling but clear. I was dying on a bench in the snow. Gasps rippled. Valor laughed softly. A tragic tale. Sarah's eyes locked onto his. I was thrown away. The laughter stopped. And he, Sarah continued, nodding slightly toward Alaric, chose to stop. Valor sneered. Kindness does not make a queen. No, Sarah replied. But cruelty disqualifies a king. The hall erupted. Lucien's eyes widened. Seraphine sucked in a sharp breath. Alaric's lips curved, not into a smile but something darker. Valor's face twisted. You dare. Alaric rose. The sound of stone cracking echoed as the throne responded to him. Enough, he said. Instant silence. My children were fading, Alaric continued, voice calm but lethal. This woman steadied them. The keep accepted her. The mirror gallery did not kill her. He stepped down from the throne, moving until he stood beside Sarah, not touching but close enough that the air changed. That alone makes her worthy of respect. Lady Nisara stepped forward, a noble woman draped in blood-red silk, eyes sharp with calculation. Or it makes her a threat, she said. Curses were pleasing faces. Sarah's stomach dropped. Alaric's eyes narrowed. Explain. Nisara tilted her head. The shadow in the mirror was not grief. It was summoned. A ripple of unease moved through the court. Nisara's gaze locked onto Sarah. Perhaps unintentionally. Or perhaps by design. Sarah's breath hitched. I didn't summon anything. Nisara smiled thinly. That is what makes mortals dangerous. You break without meaning to. Something snapped inside Sarah. She took a step forward before she could stop herself. I didn't break, she said quietly. The hall stilled. I survived, Sarah continued. And I did it without power, without immortality, without anyone protecting me. She met Nisara's gaze head-on. If that frightens you, Sarah said, perhaps the problem isn't me. Nisara's smile vanished. Alaric's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Enough posturing. He turned to the court. You want truth, he said. Here it is. The hall leaned in. My late queen's spirit was bound to the mirror gallery as a ward, Alaric continued. What we saw last night was not her. A ripple of fear. It was something older, he said. Something that feeds on grief. Sarah's skin prickled. And it recoiled, Alaric added, from her. Every gaze snapped back to Sarah. Lucien spoke up, voice steady despite his age. The children stopped shaking when she touched them. Murmurs erupted. Nisara's eyes sharpened. Impossible. Seraphine stepped forward. Not impossible. Rare. She turned to Sarah. The keep resonates with certain souls. Healers call it the hearth bond. Sarah frowned. I don't understand. Seraphine met her gaze. You anchor the living. Silence fell. Valor's voice broke it, tight with suspicion. Or she drains us. Alaric's eyes flashed dangerously. Test her. The court froze. Sarah's heart slammed. Test me? Alaric turned to her, gaze intense but steady. Only if you consent. Consent. The word felt foreign. Powerful. Sarah swallowed. What kind of test? Nisara smiled slowly. Let her stand in the heart chamber. Gasp. Seraphine stiffened. My king, that chamber strips mortals to nothing. Sarah's breath shook. Alaric studied her face. You do not have to. Sarah thought of the mirror whispering, if you stay you will die. She thought of the children's laughter returning. She thought of being told she was nothing. I will, she said. Alaric's jaw tightened. Why? Sarah's voice was quiet, but unbreakable. Because I'm done being afraid. The heart chamber lay beneath the keep. A vast circular room carved directly into the mountain's core. No torches. No mirrors. Only a crystal formation at its center, black and silver, pulsing slowly like a living heart. As Sarah stepped inside, the air pressed against her. Her breath shortened. Her knees weakened. Seraphine watched from the threshold, tension etched into her face. Alaric stood beside Sarah. You can still turn back, he murmured. Sarah shook her head. Stay with me. I will, he said instantly. Sarah stepped forward. The crystal pulsed faster. Pain lanced through her chest, not sharp but heavy like carrying grief that wasn't hers. Images flooded her mind. Children crying. A queen screaming. A throne soaked in blood. Sarah gasped. Alaric's hand hovered near her arm, but didn't touch. Breathe, he said softly. You're not alone. Sarah focused on that voice. On the calm in it. She placed her hand against the crystal. The chamber shuddered. The pain vanished. Warmth flooded outward, rippling through the stone like sunlight breaking through deep water. The crystal's color shifted, dark silver turning soft blue. The keep exhaled. Sarah staggered but didn't fall. Alaric caught her this time, steadying her, not holding her captive. The chamber fell silent. Seraphine stared, stunned. The heart accepted her. Alaric looked at Sarah, awe flickering through his controlled expression. What are you? He whispered. Sarah shook her head, tears spilling. I don't know. He looked at the crystal, now glowing steadily. Neither did my late queen, he said softly. At first. When they returned to the hall, the court stood frozen. Nisara's face was pale. Valer's confidence shattered. Alaric faced them. The keep has spoken, he said. She stays. Pause. And anyone who harms her, Alaric continued, voice dropping to something ancient and absolute, will answer to me. No one challenged him. Because the keep itself had chosen. That night, Sarah stood on a balcony overlooking endless forest. The moon hung low and bright. Alaric joined her quietly. You should hate me, Sarah said softly. I brought danger into your kingdom. Alaric shook his head. The danger was already here. He looked at her. You revealed it. Sarah swallowed. The mirror voice said I would die. Alaric's gaze hardened. Then we will make liars of fate. Sarah looked at him. Why do you trust me? Alaric was silent for a long moment. Then he said, because my children sleep tonight. Sarah's eyes burned. He added quietly, and because you stood in the heart chamber, and it did not break you. She whispered, I'm still afraid. Alaric's voice softened. So am I. They stood there, two broken rulers of different worlds, watching the moon. Unaware that deep beneath the keep, something ancient stirred. And smiled. The curse that wore a crown. The court believed the danger had passed. They were wrong. Because curses do not retreat when exposed. They adapt. And deep beneath the obsidian keep, something ancient had learned Sarah's name. And decided she was worth destroying. The first sign was the dreams. Sarah began waking just before dawn with the taste of ash on her tongue and a pressure in her chest like unseen fingers pressing inward. In her sleep, she walked corridors that didn't exist, touched doors that whispered her fears back to her, and heard a woman's voice speaking softly, never shouting, never threatening. Always patient. Always waiting. You don't belong here. Sarah sat upright in bed, breath shaking. Her chamber was quiet, bathed in moonlight. Yet the hum of the keep felt different, uneasy, as if the stone itself were restless. A knock came at the door. Sarah? Alaric's voice, low, controlled. She rose quickly and opened it. He stood there without armor, without crown, dark hair loose around his shoulders. His red eyes scanned her face immediately. You felt it, he said. Sarah nodded. The keep is restless. So are my children, Alaric replied. They woke screaming. All of them. Sarah's heart clenched. About the mirror? Alaric shook his head. About you. Her stomach dropped. What do you mean? They dreamed of fire, he said quietly. And a woman with your face, bleeding. Sarah's knees weakened. Alaric caught her arm, not gripping, just grounding. You're safe, he said firmly. But even as he said it, the words felt fragile. They moved quickly through the halls toward the children's chambers. Lucien was already awake, standing guard at the door like a soldier far older than his years. She's coming, Lucien said the moment he saw them. Sarah froze. Who? Lucien's eyes burned. The queen. Alaric's jaw tightened. Evelyn is dead. Lucien shook his head. Not her. Something wearing her memory. Inside the chamber, the younger children huddled together. Mara looked up the instant Sarah entered, and her fear eased. She's here, Mara whispered. It hurts less when she's here. Sarah knelt in front of her. What hurts? Mara pressed a small hand to her chest. The dark. Seraphine entered behind them, face drawn. My king, the wards are failing. Alaric's eyes flashed. How? Seraphine swallowed. The curse is anchored to grief. The late queen's death fractured the wards, but the children's pain kept them sealed. Sarah's breath caught. And now? Seraphine looked at Sarah. Now something else is holding the children together. Silence fell. Alaric's gaze snapped to Sarah. You. Seraphine nodded grimly. Which means the curse will try to remove her. Sarah's pulse roared in her ears. How? Seraphine hesitated. By forcing her to choose. Alaric's voice sharpened. Choose what? Her life, Seraphine said softly. Or the children's. The room went cold. No, Alaric said instantly. That will not happen. Seraphine's eyes held his. Curses do not ask permission, my king. Sarah stood slowly. Everyone turned to her. If it's anchored to grief, Sarah said, voice steady despite the fear twisting inside her, then it feeds on loss. Seraphine nodded. Yes. And it wears the face of your queen, Sarah continued, meeting Alaric's gaze, because that loss is deepest. Alaric's jaw clenched. I will not lose anyone else. Sarah's voice softened. Neither will I. Lucien stepped forward. What are you saying? Sarah looked at the children. 5 lives balanced on the edge of something ancient and cruel. I think the curse doesn't want to kill me, she said quietly. It wants me to leave. Seraphine inhaled sharply. Exile. Sarah nodded. If I walk away, the bond breaks. Alaric's eyes burned. Absolutely not. Sarah turned to him. If I stay, it will keep attacking them. Alaric stepped closer, voice dropping into something dangerous. Then I will destroy it. Seraphine shook her head. It cannot be destroyed while wearing the queen's echo. The bloodline itself sustains it. Lucien's fists clenched. Then it will keep hurting us. Sarah closed her eyes. For 7 years, she had been trained to sacrifice herself quietly. She would not do that again. But this was different. She opened her eyes and met Alaric's gaze. If I leave, she said, it won't be because I'm weak. Alaric's voice broke for the first time. I will not let you be cast out again. Sarah reached out, touching his arm gently. This time it would be my choice. Silence crushed the room. Then Mara spoke, voice small but fierce. No. Everyone turned. Mara climbed off the bed and walked straight to Sarah, wrapping her arms around her waist. She makes the dark quiet, Mara said. If she leaves, I'll break. Sarah's breath hitched. Lucien swallowed hard. She's right. Seraphine closed her eyes. The curse is accelerating. A deep tremor shook the keep. Far below, something laughed, slow, satisfied. The mirrors in the halls began to hum. Alaric straightened. Then we stop running, he said. Seraphine stared. My king. Alaric's eyes blazed. Prepare the ritual chamber. Sarah's blood ran cold. What ritual? Seraphine's voice was barely a whisper. The queen's binding. Lucien stiffened. That ritual killed Mother. Alaric turned to Sarah, gaze intense, searching. It binds a soul to the throne. Sarah swallowed. Meaning? Seraphine spoke softly. If you complete it, the curse will no longer recognize you as an outsider. Sarah's heart slammed. And the cost? Seraphine hesitated. You would never leave the kingdom. Silence. Sarah felt the weight of that truth press down on her chest. No return to the mortal world. No escape. No running. Alaric watched her like the fate of everything rested on her breath. I will not ask this of you, he said fiercely. Sarah looked at the children. At Lucien trying to be strong. At Mara clutching her dress. At a king who had never once touched her without permission. And she realized something terrifying and beautiful. For the first time in her life. She was not being sacrificed. She was being chosen. Sarah lifted her chin. I will do it, she said. Alaric's voice was raw. Sarah? I won't be bound by fear anymore, she continued. If I'm staying, I stay on my terms. Seraphine's eyes widened. You understand what this means? Sarah nodded. It means no one will ever cast me out again. The ritual chamber lay beneath the heart chamber. Older, darker, carved with symbols that glowed faintly as Sarah stepped inside. Mirrors lined the walls. At the center stood a stone dais. And above it, suspended in black crystal. A crown. Not metal. Not jewel. Memory. The mirrors rippled. The late queen's image appeared, beautiful, sorrowful. Then it twisted. The shadow peeled away, revealing its true form. Faceless, vast, stitched together from grief and hunger. Leave, it whispered inside Sarah's mind. Or watch them die. Sarah's hand shook. Alaric stood at the edge of the chamber, bound by ritual law, unable to intervene. "Sarah," he said hoarsely, "you can stop." She looked back at him. "No," she whispered. "This ends now." She stepped onto the dais. Pain exploded through her chest, not physical but emotional. Every insult, every bruise, every moment she had been told she was nothing surged forward. The curse recoiled. "You are weak," it hissed. Sarah laughed, soft, broken, defiant. "I survived you before I ever met you." She reached for the crown. The moment her fingers touched it, the mirrors shattered into light. The shadow screamed, not in rage but in terror. Because the crown did not reject her. It recognized her. Warmth flooded the chamber, blazing outward like dawn. The shadow burned, unraveling, screaming as the memory it wore collapsed. Alaric felt the bond snap and surge. The crown settled onto Sarah's head, not heavy, not painful. Right. The chamber fell silent. Sarah collapsed to her knees, gasping. Alaric crossed the chamber in a heartbeat, catching her. "You did it," he whispered, voice shaking. "You survived." Sarah looked up at him, tears streaming. "I didn't survive," she said softly. "I claimed." Above them, the keep exhaled, stone humming in harmony for the first time in years. But far beyond the mountains, something older than the curse stirred. Because queens attract enemies. And not all of them were mirrors.